So I studied about the bog
2,000-year-old
people a
body
long time
unearthed in an
ago.
Irish peat bog is revealing grisly injuries that are clear evidence of torture. Now, experts believe they've found what finally killed the man.
There's a deep stab wound to the chest, probably caused by a sword or a dagger, and it's this which is the fatal blow.
The facts are now clear. This man was tortured and then murdered.
But it didn't end there. After he died, he was decapitated and then cut in half.
Good God Almighty.
This extraordinary level of violence is far more than necessary to kill a man. The team now suspect that this is not simply a case of ancient murder.
We need to draw a distinction here within the evidence, because while this torture would have been agonizing and brutal, it doesn't seem to be mindless. The intent is to inflict pain, and something that would be much more ritualistic or ceremonial.
It's pretty clear that Old Crocken Man was ritualistically
They call this bog
murdered.
person Old Crocken Man.
The question
But there were
is,
women also who
why?
were sacrificed as
The key
well.
to cracking the mystery could be determining who Old Crocken Man really was.
The proportions of the torso tell us that he was a young man, around 25 years of age, and the size tells us he was quite powerfully built and about 5'11".
Iron Age Ireland was essentially rural and agricultural. So we might consider, for example, was this powerfully built young man a farmer?
An examination of his hands casts doubt on the theory.
Because the hands are so well preserved, we can see that the nails are relatively well manicured, and there's no calluses.
His hands had not seen a day's hard work, and that would have been really unusual in Iron Age society.
Could his diet shed light on his identity? To find out, isotopic analysis is used on his fingernails.
Based on the nitrogen levels in the analysis, we can say that he had a meat-rich diet for at least 4 months before he died.
Meat is essentially a luxury item even back then. This indicates that this man likely had high wealth or high status.
But another find suggests he was even more important.
He was wearing a leather band on his upper arm, and there was a design on the band that represented the sun. And this is a symbol that in the Celtic Iron Age was very closely associated with kingship.
The well-manicured nails,
Excuse me.
the callus-free hands, the meat-rich diet, and now kingly jewelry all adds up to Old Crocken Man being Irish royalty, maybe even a king.
It's a compelling theory, made stronger by the evidence of Old Crocken Man's lacerated nipples.
In Ireland during the Iron Age, the king's chest, and his nipples included, were a symbol of his power and his prowess.
Slicing off or cutting the nipples would be a devastating loss of power. It would mean that you were no longer king.
But what could the king have done to deserve such a terrible fate?
Iron Age Celtic culture were effectively chiefly societies, which means that the chief or the king were responsible for the maintenance and sustenance of the community. If something goes wrong, the king is held responsible.
Peter Cole.
And kings were severely punished when things didn't go to plan.
If a society or community is suffering tremendously at this time, it's very possible that they might ritualistically murder the king and remove
Good
him
God
from
Almighty.
office.
The evidence points to Old Crocken Man being ritually murdered for failing his tribe. Now, scientists hope to explain the nature of his failure and ask whether clues might be hidden in the bog itself.
Peat accumulates in easy-to-read layers.
Yeah, these bog people were put in peat mosses to preserve them. It was almost like mummification in that culture.
They analyze the deep layers of organic material and discover evidence of a catastrophic climate event. Incredibly, it dates back to the era in which Old Crocken Man was killed.
During the early Iron Age, there was this dramatic shift to a wetter, colder environment where rainfall increased and the weather cooled.
For Iron Age people, it was likely a disaster leaving the harvest in ruins and potentially starving the people.
So in the Iron Age, they didn't have any cars, they didn't have any fossil fuels, they didn't have anything. However, there was a climate change. So what caused the climate change? This is the Iron Age, right? They didn't have anything that was unnatural that they were transporting around in. So why did they have climate change? That's my question. Why did these bog people back in the Iron Age have a global weather pattern change? If it wasn't caused from fossil fuel, or it wasn't caused from, abuse of the earth with different technologies. So why did it happen? That's my question. Let's continue.
For the king, this natural disaster would have spelled the end of his reign.
Old Crockett Man may have been seen to have failed as a king because the climate destroyed the harvest.
His people had no choice but to sacrifice their failed king in order to appease the gods and anoint a new leader.
The inauguration of a new king would have been seen like a wedding celebration, the king being wedded to the goddess of the earth. And so the burial of the former king, the one who had been sacrificed.
This is what I want to also bring attention to, is that every single civilization around that era were sacrificing people. The Mayans were sacrificing people. Africans were sacrificing people. This is in Europe. They're sacrificing people. And if I'm not mistaken, even in Asia, they sacrifice people for certain things. So, what was motivating them? When the Bible talked about Abraham, was it Abraham? My brain is going dead. Going to sacrifice Isaac, right? If that's the story I'm thinking of, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, and then God told him not to. But what would possess somebody to be human sacrificing at that time in the first place? So all of these different ancient cultures were sacrificing. They were sacrificing human beings and children and what have you. Why were they doing that? So even the bog people, right? They're thinking that this is a king, and my mind is telling me, no, this wasn't a king. I feel as though that this was, they would feed these sacrifices, they would be nurtured, they would be protected, shielded, and then they were sacrificed. So I don't personally feel that this bog man, was a king. More so, he was destined to be a sacrifice. And why were they sacrificing? That's another question. Oh, what the hell?
Would have been seen as an offering to the blessings of this new union.
Modern forensic science has solved a 2,000-year-old mystery. To show how climate catastrophe may have driven an Iron Age tribe to ritually murder their king, then ceremoniously place him in the bog.
What initially appeared to just be a body thrown in a bog turns out to very likely have been an Irish king who paid the ultimate price by not being able to sustain his...
I would disagree with the fact that they thought this was an Irish king. I really do. As for the sacrifice, because it's very similar. It's very similar to the Mayans. It's very similar to the Aztecs. It's very similar in South American cultures where they sacrifice people. They nourish them until the point of their sacrifice. And when it comes to weather patterns or the change in the global, weather outlook of each country or territory, like people broke down the Mayan calendar, and that there was seasons or cycles of weather patterns. So are we actually going through global warming like we're being told, or is this something... I mean, I have my own personal opinion. I'm going to be honest with you. But I'm putting this question out there. What do you think? Do you think that do you think that global warming, yeah, fossil fuels don't help what we're going through, but do you think that we are spinning through the cosmos and that these are seasonal weather patterns that this earth goes through when it gets through certain portions of the cosmos? Because we're always rotating an axis throughout the universe, right? So what's causing the weather changes? I mean, I have more than one theory on that. I'm not going to say it right here, but I want to ask the question, what do you think?